So everything's my fault. Even if I didn't directly do it, I'm in charge of overseeing it. If it continues, it's my fault. If it happened because it was a lack of training, it's my fault. If it happens because there was a lack of systems and to be able to check along the way to make sure the intended goal was able to be met, it's my fault. So I take that level of accountability, and by taking that allows me to actually make changes in the business that's best for the business, opposed to blaming people for the business not moving the way I desire for it to move.
It's time for another episode of Rainmaker for Contractors. Interviews and success stories with $1 million plus basement waterproofing and foundation repair owners. Discover how they market and grow their companies in today's economy. Hear directly from the most successful leaders in your industry. With your host and Rainmaker for Contractors owner, Bill Crawford.
Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the Rainmaker for Contractors podcast. Today we have a special guest, someone that I've known for many years. And Andre, I'm thrilled that you're here today. How's it going?
All is well. I'm blessed beyond measure.
That's awesome. That's great. Hey, can you introduce yourself and your company and mention the services that you offer in the area and so on?
Yes, my name's Andre Wheatley. We offer basement waterproofing, foundation repair, and mold remediation services. And we cover many areas in New Jersey, throughout northern and central New Jersey at the time of this recording.
That's awesome. That's great. Hey, I like that you do mold remediation kind of stuff. I notice most basement waterproofers don't do that. That's a big deal. Of course, it relates to waterproofing. So how did you get involved with basement waterproofing in the first place?
Wow, my story's a bit different than, I guess, the average person who came up doing construction or desired to be in this industry. I had no knowledge of this industry, nor did I desire to be in it. I got involved in this industry by the hand of God. I had another business at one point that I was thinking of starting when I was much younger. God had a different plan for me in regards to what he wanted me to start, but I went with my own plan. I started the business that was in my heart, that I was more familiar with, which was like a cleaning business. Done that work many times with my father growing up. And I started that business, and when I grew it in a very short period of time, the night that I got my largest account that I was actually supposed to start that night, which was a Salvation Army, 29,000 square feet. I was really excited, biggest account. It was going to change my business, and I can get other locations, should the word get out that we were doing a good job. God spoke to me and told me, give the business up that I built and go back to the business he told me to do that I did not do. So I turned around, I gave it to a complete stranger. He told me moments later who the stranger was. And after I gave it to the stranger, I started the business God wanted me to do. And when I started that business, for a year and a half, I suffered financially, completely suffered, married with 3 kids, finances was low. It was a true test of my faith. The moment I surrendered and I asked God, for his plan for my life, I had to make a decision. The decision was I had to agree that he was here to destroy my peace, because my peace felt very much
I bet it would.
peace in my manhood, or I had to agree that he had a plan for my life, but he needed me to pass his test. So I chose that he loves me enough. I chose the knowledge that he loves me enough, and he wanted me to pass his test. And I surrendered, and I said, I will not ask you to remove this test. Only thing I will ask is one thing, that you let me know when I've passed it. That way I don't overstay my time here in the test. 2 weeks later, after I surrendered, I met a complete stranger who told me, I'm going to teach you how to make enough money for the rest of your life. He was an older gentleman. He was a mycologist, a mold doctor. I had no idea what that was. I thought he was joking. I had to pull it up online. And he traveled around the world, and he told me in so many words, I'm sort of a big deal. But when I spoke to you over the phone, I had to drive an hour and a half to meet who I was talking to. And I'm thinking, this guy's kidding. It's about time for you to get out of my house, sir. He said, I'm going to tell you what you need to know, but I'm only going to speak to you every 3 months. The first quarter that I speak to you, you have not done what we talked about. I'm going to part ways and wish you well moving forward. I told him I cannot take his opportunity because I must pray. It's something between me and God where I won't do anything without his permission. I went back to God, got the okay, immediately threw everything I had into everything he told me to get certified for. By the first quarter that we had to speak again, I had done everything he said, plus about triple of that in other certifications, because I just got certified for everything connected to what he was talking about. And my first month in business, when I moved forward, it was a success. It was a life-changing success. And for 15 years, my business has never been the same.
Wow. That's great. So as you look at your business today, the first part of it really was in relation to mold, not so much in relation to basement waterproofing. Is that what I'm hearing, right?
Good point. So yeah, so it was a relationship to mold, then we moved to waterproofing, then we moved to water damage, dry out and clean up. God strategically placed people in my life, for some for a short time, some for a very long time, that gave me enough insight to be able to go in myself and really delve into the field and get as much knowledge as I can, book knowledge and experience in the field.
That's awesome. So you're okay. So you're clearly offering more services than a typical basement waterproofing. I could see that really advantageous for customers. So that's great.
One of
And
the things I do want to mention is that the waterproofing, a lot of waterproofers don't offer mold remediation. The insurance is too high if they're going to get the real insurance that you need for it, not just general liability, which does not cover mold in many cases. Also, what they're going to do to compete with mold companies, they're going to offer to spray something in the customer's house, and they're going to offer to sanitize, which does not mean to eradicate the actual fungus. It means to lower it and minimize the amount of it, the spore count, opposed to disinfecting, which is to completely get rid of it, and or doing a mold remediation. So a lot of companies they compete with companies like mine based on wordplay. We'll sanitize your walls.
I could see how just going in there and spraying something and there's no really guarantee or any kind of solid work. It would kind of be easy money for another contractor just to kind of spray something.
100%. They can. I've seen many different contractors. They'll say they'll spray something. They'll say they'll just throw a number up there for a warranty. However, when you look into the details, it's like you have something up front, but when you search, it's removed from the back end. So you actually end up with nothing. So you have a 10-year warranty, but there's so many exclusions in there because it's not a mold remediation that you end up with nothing.
Got it.
Yeah.
I always like the phrase helps reduce, which
Hmm.
basically means nothing.
Right.
Hey, just looking at basement waterproofing for a second, what do you feel you do better than most other basement waterproofing companies? Like how and where do you shine in that space?
Processes. Most basement waterproofing companies, they send a crew to the job. The first thing is when the crew is there, there's a bit of anxiety with the customers at first because they have guys there that they don't have any rapport with. These guys are looking at a work order and they're just trying to get the work. They're missing that initial job orientation where you go over everything with the customer. You do the walkthrough, so you talk about everything before you touch anything. So we're going to do that job orientation at the beginning of the job. They're not documenting the process. We document the process and keep the customer aware through the entire process of doing their job. We have multiple checkpoints. We will invite the customer down in the basement once we've made sure it's safe and secure for them to be there. So I think the largest thing that we do is communication, not just before the job, during the job, and after the job. We're heavy into the communication with the customer. And when their job is done, many companies will either never reach back out to the customer again for fear of there being a problem and they want to not get a service call, or they'll only reach out to the customer specifically to ask for a referral. When we reach out to the customer, we're going to definitely ask for a referral. And if the customers felt as though we've earned a referral, but ideally we're looking to see how our system is working. We're not avoiding problems. We're inviting them to let us know if they're unhappy with anything. A year later, 2 years, we even contact customers from 5 years ago. And that level of togetherness and community that we forge with the customer makes getting referrals a lot easier, and it helps building trust.
Excellent. Well said. Having owned my own waterproofing company for 15 years in the Chicago market, I could tell you that 95% of the time when we had an issue with a job, we call it the absentee homeowner. So we always had systems and processes. When back in the day when there was Polaroid cameras, we would take pictures and leave them on the kitchen table for the absentee homeowner and so on. But I love the over communication that you have. I think that's how you avoid any kind of problems. You check in with the homeowner several times. So I love your process and your commitment to communication, as well as you're not one of these waterproofers that, want to slam the job in the ground, get the money, and hope you never see the customer again. And You're not the kind of owner that if you see a customer you're walking down the sidewalk, you're going to jump to the other side of the street so that you don't see eyes. You're proud to stand behind your work. You're committed to it. So that's a beautiful thing. Nice job. Well,
I would like to say something in regards to
sure.
that. Many of my customers, so I build personal relationships with my customers, not because I think it's necessary, because that's who I am as a person. I'm a people's person. I love people, right? So I have customers who they call me with personal issues. We talk about personal issues. I've prayed with many of my customers, either at their home or later. And I build the type of relationship with my customers because whether I'm there or not, I contact every single customer. Doesn't matter what my process is and who's handling it. And I know I'm not needed to call every customer because I have systems and I have staff to handle that. I personally call them. I personally make sure that they have a way to reach me. A direct communication. They can call the office or they can call the owner. But when you love people, that resonates outside of selling them a service, that you actually care about them. I share my testimony with customers who ask me. This year marks the year, 2024 marks the year, actually last year, where I've had more customers than ever ask me how I got started. Right in the middle of me trying to tell them about the efflorescence on the wall and there's mold and so forth. They ask me, Andre, how did you get started? And I know when they ask that, it's an opportunity for me to share a very vulnerable and transparent area of my life that can bring awareness to their personal life. Because I realize I'm not just dealing with customers, I'm dealing with people. And I think my awareness of people and care for people has led me to a place where it makes them feel safe to actually do business with me. I've actually told customers, based on them getting comfortable with me and sharing their personal situation, that I don't think today is the day to do this estimate.
Mm.
I've had a customer, she was very emotional about something and she was holding it together. And I could not ignore that for the sake of getting money on that day. And I
Sure.
said, I opened up the door to ask her, is there anything she would like to talk about personally? And I know she doesn't know me, but if she needed that, I want her to know it's a safe place and we can talk about it. And after listening to how much anguish she was going through, she said, Andre, I just want to do the work here. Let me get my check. How much is it? So that's an integrity moment right there. Let me get my check. How much of it? How much is it? I haven't even given her the price yet. So I told her, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to move forward with signing a contract. You're not in that position. Let's talk about where you are. Let's get through that. I will check up on you if you don't call me first, and we can talk about the business later. That level of care, people remember that long after you fix their basement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, no, you remember those contractors for sure.
We've had several listeners express interest in being guests on our podcast, and we think that's fantastic. If your company generates over $1 million in revenue and you believe you have valuable insights to share, we'd love to hear from you. Additionally, if you are a supplier to the industry and want to explore partnership opportunities with Rainmaker, we're open to discussing collaborations. Finally, if you're a basement waterproofing or foundation repair contractor looking to boost your online marketing efforts and generate more leads, reach out to us. We're here to help you grow.
That's great. And just looking at your reviews, to have a 4.9 with over 200 reviews, that's with today's standards of customer service and excellence, like that's pretty hard to do. So nice work in that. Let me ask you, what's something you've learned over the years? Like what's something you did maybe 10 years ago that you do way better? Or is there I mean, I learned that when I was an owner, sometimes something would happen and your initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? How am I going to get through this? But then, there's always two things. You have to deal with the situation, make it right, but then you have to create a better system so that never happens again. And then you look back over time and you realize that when that situation happened, that made you a better company, that improved a process, that allowed you to serve clients and customers better than you ever did before. Do you have anything that comes to mind when I talk like that?
Absolutely. Immediately, my first response would be accountability. My level of accountability that I take now is very much different than before. I believe that as the leader, your job is to go first. You blaze the trail first, to walk through fire first if necessary. So everything's my fault. Even if I didn't directly do it, I'm in charge of overseeing it. If it continues, it's my fault. If it happened because it was a lack of training, it's my fault. If it happens because there was a lack of systems and to be able to check along the way to make sure the intended goal was able to be met, it's my fault. So I take that level of accountability, and by taking that allows me to actually make changes in the business that's best for the business, opposed to blaming people for the business not moving the way I desire for it to move. Whereas before, if you made a mistake, you were the problem. You were the problem. You made a mistake. You're making my life difficult. I'm trying to run a good business over here. Maybe I got to get rid of you, right? Opposed to now saying that's not the way to handle people, and it's not the way to handle my business. I must know that everything's my fault and take accountability for not just the good, take accountability for the bad, and not only take it from a place where I'm just doing my duty, but to look at it as an opportunity to grow. I don't want to make the same mistake twice or more than twice. I want to learn from it quickly. Within 24 hours, I want to learn from it, and I want to make a change that directly affects the outcome in the future within 24 hours. And then I want to set up systems as much as possible to be able to review and see if we're headed in that direction long before we get there in the future.
For sure. That sounds great. I always go to my initial reaction, having owned businesses for, I think, 40 years is, do we have that process in place? And then, was it followed? And then that kind of sheds a lot of light on it. And then, does the person even know the process? I love the take responsibility thing. I used to have a lot of arguments with my franchisor actually about when a problem goes wrong. I learned from my schooling that 90% of the time it's a manager's fault. So I always I lead like you do. I take responsibility first. I tend to say, even to this day, if something's going wrong, it's probably my fault. I didn't communicate well enough, don't have a good enough system or something like that. So I love your thought process there. Another question in regards to sort of the expanded multiple services that you offer. What do you see the advantage of, like, let's say a basement waterproofing client going with you in light of the fact that you have a mold remediation, mold mitigation, and probably all sorts of different things that you have expertise on versus just going with, a company that just specializes in basement waterproofing? What's the advantage of going with you?
Okay. So the advantage of going with us, where we specialize in mold, opposed to just a waterproofing company that does not, let's say on a job that requires a mold remediation and waterproofing, is one, we're going to do the job at the same time. You don't have to call in a separate company. You don't have to have separate terms of agreement with two different companies and two different warranties. You have one company to call. And then two, you can more so trust the one company that does both than two companies that could end up blaming each other for something not being done right.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would think, having worked with waterproofers, I think that they sometimes they like to throw some terms around about mold, but I also know enough about the mold industry that there's some pretty high certifications that you need to obtain and sustain through certification. So if you're going to really go into it, you have to really be into it and be committed to maintaining your certification. So I'm guessing that you also bring a level of expertise that is not backed with an article you read, but it's actually backed with a lot of experience and certification and training that you've gone through in your company as well. So, yeah, and I could definitely see the advantage of working with one company. The other thing that comes to mind from me is if, let's say my basement has, some water seepage, the customer, part of the reason why they're reaching out to a contractor is they have the expertise to fix it and so on. If you call a contractor, it's kind of like, going to an auto mechanic, like, hey, do you think my car's broken? Yeah, it's broken. I'm going to fix it for you. If you go to a waterproofer, they're going to say, sure, we can fix this. Well, you might have some mold issues that it would not be their primary concern because that's maybe not something that they fix primarily. But I could see your company could go in there and offer expertise, whether they're aware of it or not. You also are positioned to be able to identify that stuff a lot better than a typical basement waterproofing company. So it's really interesting.
Here's a few problems, Bill, I want to put in that what happens, I want to put out in the environment when a company does a specialized mold. A lot of times when you're doing a waterproofing job, you're going to do interior French drain on the inside of the house. You're going to do a 2 to 4 foot cut of the sheetrock or drywall in order to install your system. Well, if there's an actual mold issue, it is generally going to be at the lower parts of the wall where the moisture has been coming in. Well, part of the French drain job, you are cutting that, you're agitating it, you're making it airborne. So you're actually cross-contaminating and you're releasing mold spores in the air doing a waterproofing job without the proper protocols and procedures necessary to control it, because you're not thinking that. You're thinking, this is what I need to do in order to do my French drain job. Well, what about all the cross-contamination and just, elevated spore count that you're putting in the air to do that job? You don't specialize in mold, where if the company specialized in mold and waterproofing, they would be able to handle that successfully. There's a lot of reasons why many people, at least in New Jersey, they don't not only do mold, that they're not certified in mold. It's because New Jersey, for many years, hasn't had a certification that they required you to get to do mold. Technically, one of my customers, and I tell my customers this, technically you could be doing mold by next month and have never done anything. Just get a New Jersey contractor's license. Jersey doesn't require it. So what happens is it's a Wild West out here where, I can charge a few $1,000s extra for mold. Okay, let me pick up some paint from Home Depot and let me just spray everything white. Right? It all looks the same when it's white. Never mind whether it's fixed. Never mind whether you've made the environment more toxic for the people who live there. Because of that, you got cowboys out here. Get a paint sprayer, get some paint, spray, charge a few $1,000 extra.
That's the worst thing you could do. Now you're trapping moisture behind the page, and now it's going to accelerate the mold growth. Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
Yep.
Hey, wrapping up here a little bit, what advice would you give to, let's say, a contractor or a basement waterproofer if they're thinking about starting their own business? What words of wisdom would you have with all the ownership years of experience you have?
Know your numbers. All your hard work and everything that you do and you put out there means nothing if you don't know your numbers. You don't know whether you're losing. You don't know whether you're winning. When I first started, I just went out and I was making more money than I've ever made, and customers was happy. I was happy. And I'm like, this is great. Thank you, God. Because when I was on that test, it was the definition of poverty. However, what I realized that when I actually looked at the numbers, finally looked at the numbers, I was hemorrhaging money and had no idea that I was hemorrhaging for as long as I was. I was losing money to the point where at some point it looked like, hey, I could work half as much as I do now and just go get a job. I had to realize that it's my fault. Know the numbers. If you don't know your numbers and you don't know what you're looking to net at the end of the year, your bottom line, your net, and you're not tracking that, then you're probably not meeting that.
Great advice. Great advice. I work with enough owners to know that the majority of owners, that's not their favorite spot to go. Like, owners don't get excited about, even if you say, hey, you need to spend 1 to 2 hours per month going over your financials, figuring out what your KPI. It's like, yeah, I really should. But kind of like what you said, I'm making more money. I'm making good money. Like, it's good. I just don't like doing that. Man, you got to do that. This is so critical. Hey, Andre, thanks so much for joining our podcast today. I really appreciate your wisdom, and it's great to hear your story.
Right. You're more than welcome. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Rainmaker for Contractors podcast, where basement waterproofing and foundation repair business owners and industry experts share marketing and sales information that helps you reach more customers. Please leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and get all of our show notes at rainmakerforcontractors.com/podcast.